Good morning, Scramble. Glad to have you here and glad to have the mayor in.
Good morning, Steve.
It's Will Joyce on a Monday morning. And so you wanted to be mayor. That's our segment.
That's the running title of this, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. By the way, I received a direct message on Saturday, and it was from Mike Turpin.
Oh, sure.
From Flashpoint.
Yeah.
And we were mentioned on Flashpoint on Thursday night.
Oh, really?
On the Thursday primetime show.
Okay.
And I didn't see it live, but I did get a text saying, hey, you just got a shout out on Flashpoint. They did a prime time between 7 and 8. I think the ratings were really good. And so therefore then somebody sent me a link to it. So I did watch it back. And but Mike mentioned, and he was nice enough to mention the morning scramble on it, but he said they have a courageous mayor, Will Joyce, there.
Oh, wow.
And they were talking about what we have in place here. And then Mike reached out to me, and I appreciated that on Saturday. And he was going to send me a link, and I let him know that I already had that, but I really appreciated it. But anyway, and he also said, tell Scott Petty hi. So, Scott, if you're out there, Mike Turpin says hi. But we did get a mention, and he called you courageous mayor because we were one of the first cities. And I know that you're not in it for compliments, but some of the language that we took, I know, came from some other places. But a lot of the stuff that we utilized here or you put together here, the language was used in Tulsa and Oklahoma City, I think, as well. And it's interesting to see how people view others to try to learn from what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of cities and city attorneys and mayors and different folks who have been sharing information back and forth and trying to figure out the best way to go forward with some of these issues. I would say first, I think in terms of the mask ordinance, if that's what they were talking about, that was a city council decision here, just like it has been in Norman, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and other places. Those aren't mayoral decrees like we had early in this deal and in terms of our emergency declarations. So I think the city councils in those places really deserve a lot of the credit for getting these things through. I know Councilman Mark Stonecipher was the councilman in Oklahoma City who proposed the mask ordinance at to their council. So it's not just the mayors who are who are stepping forward and trying to get this stuff done. I think I've watched a little bit of all of those meetings, the Norman City Council meeting, the Oklahoma City one, and the Tulsa one, and they're pretty similar in terms of the discussions that happen with ours. And there's a lot of city councilors too who are stepping up and saying, this is something that needs to happen. And I think that's one of the reasons it was a good idea to do this mask ordinance as an ordinance, to have the city council discussion, to have those folks weigh in all these cities. So you're getting more than just a mayor standing up and saying, I think this needs to happen. You're seeing it from a whole city council.
Let's talk about Stillwater. And I was told by Michelle actually went to an event on Saturday night at the Tumbleweed, which is not within the city limits.
No, it's not.
Tell us how that works, because she said it was a dance recital.
Yep.
Pretty big crowd. And very few people wearing masks.
It was outside. It was. I wasn't there, but I've seen some of the pictures on Facebook. I think that's why they wanted to do it on an outside stage, so there was a little bit less of an issue. But it is outside the city limits, so our city ordinance has no bearing on it at all. Our ordinances, whether they're masks or anything else that the city of Stillwater passes, don't apply outside the city limits, and so Tumbleweed or even really the Payne County Fairgrounds or any of those sort of gathering places around outside the city limits are not subject to any of our ordinances.
Would you like to see that changed? Where that's where the statewide mandate
Yes,
would solve that. Okay,
yes.
I saw this was a little bit with Jake Tapper. If you're familiar with who Jake Tapper is, he's on CNN.
Oh, okay.
And he was interviewing the governor of Mississippi, Republican governor, who seemed like, I mean, I didn't know who he was. I've seen him before. Seemed like a good guy. It seemed like he wanted to do things right. I mean, and
sure.
It wasn't a hostile.
Most of them do.
Yeah, that's right. But it wasn't hostile or
Sure.
anything like that. But they have 13 cities, I believe, in Mississippi that have mandates.
Okay.
And he's all for that. These are hot spots.
Yeah.
And his philosophy was, and it's shared by many, the fact that we're going to give him local control.
Yeah.
And so Jake put up the situation. Is it going to become a statewide mandate? And he doesn't intend to do that. Although he didn't say absolutely positively never.
Yeah.
He basically said, we're monitoring everything, but we think this is what's best right now. And Jake used the example, and I thought this was good. He said there is an example of over the state of you don't have a rule that says no peeing in this end of the pool. because it doesn't stay in that end of the pool.
Yeah.
That's a good example because people do travel.
Yeah.
And so just because in Biloxi they have that mandate, if in Meridian they do not,
Yep.
those people travel from one city to another. And so that's why some, and I think you may fall in the, and plus it takes the pressure off of it, I think.
Well, it just puts the pressure somewhere else. But yeah,
Well,
I mean,
I think, Will, I really think, because I've been in Walmart twice, 100% each time.
yeah.
Some of those folks, everybody was in good mood, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it takes pressure off of people who may go, I'm not a wimp, I'm not going to wear a mask. Well, in this time, you have to wear one. So there's no pointing your finger or saying, why are you wearing one? Because they have to.
Yeah.
So I think on some people, it may alleviate that pressure on, I don't want to. So, and people might make fun of me. And they're not going to make fun of you because it wasn't your choice.
Yeah, no, I think that's true, and I think you're right in terms of the statewide aspect of a disease like this, right? It is not something that just only affects one area or one part of a state or one metropolitan area, that sort of thing. Certainly, the numbers are higher in those places, but we've seen outbreaks of coronavirus around the state, including in some pretty rural places. And really in those rural places that have the least access to healthcare and some of the highest incidence of other medical conditions that cause complications with coronavirus. And so it would, to me, make sense if it was done at a broader level. Because you're right. I mean, we have folks here in Stillwater that commute to Oklahoma City or Tulsa to work every day. We have folks from Oklahoma City and Tulsa that commute into work. We have folks from from around the area, Cushing, Perkins, Perry, Pawnee, that come into Stillwater every day for work or for shopping or whatever it is. And so it's a very mobile society, and coronavirus is a very mobile virus. It's very contagious, and it's not just staying. It doesn't stop at the city limits. And so to me, I am a big proponent of local control. I feel like government is best small and local. But this is one of those rare sort of exceptions where you say, well, this is not just purely a local issue. It's not something that only affects one location at a time. It is cross-border, and so to me, yes, it would make sense if we were able to see more consistent rules. And we talked about this back at the beginning of March when we started putting restrictions in place in the first place, closing, keeping group sizes down and closing city facilities, and then eventually restaurant dining and bars and that sort of thing in March and early April. And we were asking the governor to do that on a statewide basis, which he did eventually, I think, recognizing that it was not just a big city issue or a big town issue. And so, it's a little frustrating to see that that's not happened yet, and to hear Governor Stitt especially be very adamant that that's not going to happen. So, we'll see. We'll see how many, I think with more towns, we've had a number of towns reach out to us here in Stillwater to ask for our ordinance and ask us about the process, and they are considering it as we go forward. And I think the other big thing is that there are a lot of retailers who are of their own volition saying we're going to require it no matter what.
Right.
So, the Walmarts, the Targets,
Lowe's has done it now.
Yeah, Lowe's is doing it now. So, those folks are recognizing the concerns, and it's not just at their stores in big cities or wherever. It's everywhere, and so that I think will help create more of a critical mass here.
So unless there's a statewide thing, there can't be a countywide, right? I mean, you can't have.
I don't think the county
Okay.
does not have the police power
Right.
that the city does in that respect. So they not, I don't think are not able to accept it unless the governor does it.
Because when it's someplace like that that's almost in the city, or it's the
Yeah.
same as.
Yeah.
I mean, I live as close to the tumbleweed probably as I live here.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not knocking the weed. It sounds like they were outside and they tried.
Yeah,
to
I
spread
mean, I
things.
think they were
That's
trying
not,
to do
that's not a
the right
personal thing.
Yeah.
It's just when the rules are different there and they don't apply, then the people didn't adhere to
Sure.
them. And
Yeah,
and that
absolutely.
was their choice at that time.
And that applies. There's a number of large church congregations in Stillwater that are outside the city limits, right? And so those those Sunday services are not subject to the mask rule the same way.
What are the rules?
Those kinds of gatherings are really the high. They're part of Oklahoma City. What Oklahoma City health department put out there as kind of the Serious 7 or something like that, where they talked about those
Right.
large indoor long time gatherings. So, whether it's in a bar or close to people for a long time inside, church services, funerals, weddings, those sorts of things are the places where they're seeing, it spread the most.
What are the rules within the city? We know about the mask, but about distancing within the church.
Well, I mean, the rules are
Do the
not,
best you can, or
they're not, they're not, situation specific, right? I mean,
Okay.
the ordinance treats churches just like it treats any other indoor gathering,
Okay.
right? So there's nothing specific that deals with church services necessarily. But all of, so the mask rule in Stillwater is you need to be wearing a mask when you're in a situation where you're in contact with other people outside your household and you can't adequately social distance. So if you're inside a building and there's 4 people inside a giant church and you're all sitting 20 feet apart from each other, then no, you wouldn't under the ordinance wouldn't be required even inside to be wearing a mask in that situation. If you're not able to, and the question there is, well, I might think I can sit 6 feet away from somebody, but it doesn't keep somebody from walking up next to me and starting to talk, right? And so the best course of action is just to go ahead and wear a mask whenever you're, especially inside around people that 6 feet of distance may not be able to be maintained. But that's the rule, right? I mean, if you can adequately social distance, if you can keep, if you're, I know a lot of church services, my church, they've still got all the every other row,
Right.
Spread out and all that kind of stuff. And if you're observing that kind of distance in those settings, then the ordinance would not require you to wear a mask. Now, the question is, can you consistently do that? The best, I think the rule of thumb is just go ahead and wear it the whole time, just so you don't, accidentally get too close.
This is opinionating a little bit, I guess, but the excuse that the governor said, how are you going to enforce it, is lame. I mean, you might as well just say one way or another, but how are you going to enforce any law? You could say that about any law. So that's the lamest excuse. How are you going to enforce it?
I don't know. I mean, I get it, because it's a struggle.
How are you going to enforce smoking or anything else?
Right. You're right. It's just a matter of, in the current climate, and given the concerns, and given the legitimate exceptions there are, it does become. I mean, it's not a good excuse to not do anything,
right,
at all. But it is something that we spent a lot of time talking about in our, and I think when you watch Tulsa's deliberations, and they had a different ordinance in place that had higher fines and it had all this sort of stuff in place, and they said, we kind of like the way Stillwater did it.
Did they say that?
Yeah, they specifically adopted in through amendments.
You were like Mr. Popular last week.
Well, it's not
Good
me.
job.
I didn't. Our city attorney wrote those.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we went through in our discussions
Sure.
and both of our readings and made adjustments and edits, but from me and from other city council members. So it's a team effort for sure. But if you go back and look at a lot of the city declarations, the emergency declarations by mayors, starting back in March, all the way through now, you will see the language that Stillwater adopted first, adopted in many, many places, because I think we've got a really good team working on these ordinances and trying to be as thoughtful and thinking about, okay, how does enforcement work? Okay, how does this work in these situations? And we've crafted, I think, pretty good language, and you have seen it adopted in many places across the state.
I do understand what you mean about adopting those and putting it together is tough. How are you going to do this? What should be the fines? I understand that completely. It's just it's to me being used as an excuse. Here's why we can, and you could use that. We heard that some with the smoking stuff. How are you going to enforce it?
Yeah.
I mean, it hadn't been that long ago since I remember driving down the road and I had a policeman kind of wave his finger. Well, I mean, I was driving a little too fast. You might slow down a little bit. And it was friendly. I think he even smiled, right? Mm-hmm. But it was sort of, hey, it doesn't mean if you're going 39, we're going to pull you over every time.
Sure.
But it means you know what the speed limit is.
I mean, seatbelt violations, right? I mean, what are you going to stop everybody and check them, see if they're wearing their seatbelt? Of course, they don't do that. It only comes up in certain situations. If you get stopped for something else, they might say, okay, we're going to write you a seatbelt ticket. But I don't know how many seatbelt tickets we write, but I'm sure it's not a ton. I mean, the same thing with cell phone use.
Oh, sure.
In a lot of places.
Yeah.
Texting while driving. I mean, that's almost impossible to if you're just standing on the street corner and try to figure out. Now, some people are super blatant about it, holding their phone up in front of their face while they're driving. But you're right. I mean, enforcement is a struggle on all of these
Right.
kinds of issues, and it's not an excuse not to do anything, but it does have to be, it has to be talked about and considered, and try to figure out, how do our police officers deal with this? Is this something that where are they going to get involved, and how are they going to get involved? And you got to talk with your your police department and say, how does this look, and what's it going to, how are you guys operationally going to deal with this? And so it's difficult. It's not just something that you would throw off to the side and say we don't care about that. But it's certainly not an excuse not to do anything.
Right. And rules do, even if you don't. You mentioned the phones.
Yeah.
Before I had a Bluetooth situation, back when we used
Sure.
to, we still passed that law where you couldn't talk on your phone. I don't know how it was worded, but I can remember being on the Cimarron Turnpike and talking to a friend on the phone, seeing a policeman in the back and going, "Hey, I need to get back to you because there's a cop right behind me."
Yeah.
Right. And they could see, you're talking into your phone.
Yeah.
And so I was following the rules because it was a rule. Never got a ticket, never got
Sure.
anything. But it's nice to have that in place because it does cause you to adhere to things.
Well, and I think you've seen this week in Stillwater. I mean, we're just a little over a week now with the ordinance in place, and at least in my, I've been to the big stores, I've been to some small stores, went and did a little, Crazy Day stuff this last week, and I've been to Eskimo Joe's to eat, and I've been to Nookie to eat, and I've been a couple other places around, and I mean, people are wearing them.
Yeah.
Not everybody, not everybody's doing it. There's certainly some folks who are still holding out and saying they never will and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But we put the ordinance in place, and 95% of people said, okay, it's a rule. I get it. I'm going to do it. I mean, for most of us, it's a few minutes out of our day that we're in a place like that we need to put the mask on. Now, I know for some people, they've got to wear a mask, for workers in these places. It's much more of a big deal. They're wearing a mask all the time. And I get that. It's not easy. It's not something that is the most comfortable thing to do all day long. But, I think people understand the reasons behind it, and they're figuring out ways. There's all kinds of new products out there now in terms of mask, different things you can wear to help make it more comfortable and all that sort of stuff. And people are doing that, and we're adapting.
I saw a little clip this morning on, I think it was on a regular news channel, but it was taken from a local major league game that was going on. Now they're playing whatever. They're
They're
doing
doing like
stuff.
spring training games, kind of.
Yeah,
right?
and then they'll start actually Thursday. But this
Not
guy
in
hit
Canada,
this.
though.
Huh? Not in
in Canada.
Canada. Oh, that is right.
I don't know. What are they doing with that? Where are the Blue Jays going to play?
They're gonna play. They don't play any home games, so I guess, right?
Yeah. Anyway.
But anyway, this guy hit this monster home run. I think it was a Yankee Stadium, and he was wearing a mask. I don't know what the rules are. I haven't watched the game yet, but he was wearing, and he had his mask on, and you could barely see his eyes. And
Really?
he hit this monster home run, and the announcer goes, the way he's playing, 5 years from now, he's still going to be wearing that mask.
Baseball players are superstitious. You get on a hot streak with a mask on. You're not taking it off.
Oh, he had it over his nose and everything. I mean, he just had his eyes showing. It looked like a
That's
winter
good.
game or something. So I don't know what the rules are as far as, but they don't all have to wear masks because they're tested, I think, right now every other day.
I guess. Yeah.
That was I don't
They
know,
must be
football
using
still.
up all the tests from other people who need them.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so like in our ordinance, athletic fields, basically, the people on the field are exempt from the rules, so they don't have to, but certainly they can if they want to. And if we get to high school sports, and if we get to that kind of stuff in school, then those would be exempted under our ordinance. But I'm sure that the schools will have different rules in place and different things that they'll mandate. So.
Yeah. And we get a break in here. We'll dive into some other stuff. You got a meeting tonight, right?
We do have a meeting tonight.
Other stuff on it?
Yes, like
Hot dogs.
like actual other city business that doesn't necessarily deal with this at all.
We'll take that.